the GOP, all they do is pretend like they're fighting, and they always come up short, no matter what. They always can't block the bill, or they always don't have enough votes to pass theirs. It's pathetic, honestly.
So you ran as a Republican, but the GOP was your biggest enemy?
Absolutely. And they pretend like they're pro-liberty and they pretend like they're pro-freedom, but they're not. The GOP and the DNC put out emails within 5 minutes, and they were almost identical. If it doesn't scream Uniparty when you read these two statements, I don't know what does. The GOP establishment, I think, is more of an enemy to the people than the crazy left at this point, because at least the crazy left, who they are.
Ian Smith Fitness. It was a brutal battle to keep his gym open amid New Jersey tyranny during the pandemic, and now he has gotten into politics and he is dropping all the truth bombs about it. I hate to say it, but we've got a uniparty on our hands. So what can we do about it? Ian is giving his take on what each person can do to save America right now. Before we jump all the way into it, shout out to the sponsor of my coverage, which is Noble Gold. Things are getting tough out here. Inflation's at 8.2%, and it's just getting worse. And we're not all great with money, are we? At times like these, you need a trusted partner to look after you and make sure that you'll be okay. Noble Gold is the team you want on your side. Keep your money safe. Grab an incredible free 3-ounce silver American Virtue coin when you open your qualifying IRA account with them this month of over $20,000. You can't go wrong with Noble Gold. Call 877-646-5347 to find out more, or visit noblegoldinvestments.com. Link down below. There's always a risk of loss, and past performance is not indicative of future results. With that being said, here's my interview with Ian Smith. Hey everyone, today I am thrilled to be joined by Ian Smith, who became world famous when he defied the lockdown orders in 2020, kept his gym open no matter what, no matter fine. I remember, Ian, my mom actually, I think, is the one who first told me about you. She's like, you got to check this guy out on Instagram. He is defying every government order, and it is so inspirational.
Good.
So you just came out with a book. You told me about it, and I was reading about it. I love this line you have, quote, "After all, free men do not ask for permission or for forgiveness when it comes to doing what is right."
Yep. That was kind of the whole premise of why we opened the gym. Just like pretty much every other small business in the country, we obeyed that original lockdown order because, we didn't have enough information to confidently stay open. The idea never sat well with us, but, we were being told, just as everybody remembers, a whole host of outrageous and extravagant lies about how deadly this thing was. And, we shut down just like everybody else, but it just didn't feel right. And, like many other people early on, we started paying attention to both the science and the politics, because that was why we were shutting down and who was shutting us down. And very quickly, neither one of those things made sense. So we came to the conclusion pretty quickly within the first 2 weeks that we were going to reopen. And we knew to a degree that we were going to face some conflict from the government, and that they probably weren't going to be happy with us. But we had no idea, I think, the level of just how insidious this whole thing was. And as soon as it became apparent, which it did, then the mission kind of changed. At first we were just opening because it was the right thing to do. And then, it was no longer about a gym. It was about doing what was right when we were being told to comply and not to ask questions. And people were being threatened, their livelihoods were being threatened, and people were being arrested, and all of these injustices were happening. And the idea that we're supposed to ask government for permission to live our lives as free men and women just doesn't sit right with me. And that's kind of the premise of what we did. It's, we don't ask for permission to live our lives, especially when we're not harming anybody, especially when we're an asset to the community. Our gym is a place that people came to be healthy, both physically and mentally, emotionally. And then you come in and you tell us that we have to shut down for over a year, or up to a year. You know, they said 2 weeks, and they opened gyms in New Jersey at the end of the summer. So in like September 1st of 2020, you know, and that's when they allowed gyms to open at partial capacity. And it just, you know, we weren't going to do that. We weren't going to ask these people for permission. And I certainly wasn't going to ask for their forgiveness for what we did, because we were never sorry about it. The only thing that we were sorry about was not opening back up quick enough.
Wow. Yeah. It's like, if you have to ask the government's permission, are you really free?
Yeah, exactly. You're not.
So whatever happened, because I know you had immense fines from the governor, like to the extent that it would be impossible to pay these fines. Whatever happened with that?
Yeah, so they started, you know, the whole series of events was just a series of escalations. You know, they started with some summons on the first day, and then they were kind of coming after not only us but our members, and then they were arresting people, and they arrested us. And you know, they knew that what they were doing was wrong, and they knew that there was no real punishment, you know, to punish us with, because the executive order is essentially meaningless. It's a request, if anything. But they got a judge here in the state of New Jersey named Robert Luggie to put an illegal court order on us to close down. And of course, we refused that. But once you refuse a judge's court order, there are some tangible punishments that can be levied against you, even if it's wrong, because they want you to go and fight it in the court system, you know, knowing that will take forever to do so. So we said, no, we're going to fight it in the court system, but we're going to stay open as well. So they started levying a $15,497.76 per day fine for every day that we were open, which is absurd. I mean, for a gym of 1,000 members, we weren't even charging members at the time, but for a gym of 1,000 members that charge $30 a month, you know, that's quite a hefty fine there. You know, so that was probably the biggest escalation of it all. They wound up taking money from our bank account to the tune of $200,000. They just stripped it right out. They called.
So the money just disappeared one day from your bank account?
It did. We came, you know, we came into work as we were doing every day, and sort of setting up the opening of the gym. And you know, my partner at the time turned around and said they took all of our money, and I laughed because I thought he was joking. And then you look over at our bank account, and it actually said negative like $3,000 or something like that, because there was a payment going through, and they levied the taking of our money at the same time. So we wound up with negative $3,000. They took $200,000 all in total. And that was in the middle of ongoing litigation. That was in the middle of an appeals process. That was money that was not charged, you know, by our members. Those were strictly donations that we had received. And they didn't care. They just took it. So that's actually still ongoing. We still have an appeals process going on in the court system for that. But we wound up in five different courts altogether. So many of the issues have been resolved, and then many are still ongoing. The biggest victory for us was they had taken our business license approximately a year, almost a year into it, right before they opened the gyms back up in New Jersey. Governor Murphy had instructed the town of Belmar to hold a special meeting and essentially revoke our business license in the town. So that's, you know, your ability when we talk about being free, you know, you need a license to charge, you know, or to be in business, which is kind of goes against this whole idea of freedom. But they took that license.
Why do you need a license to have a business in the first place?
I mean, and it's so stupid. It's, you know, 99.9% of the time, it'll never even be an issue. It's just a way for the town to collect revenue. Just another way to kind of tax and to reach into the pockets, because they don't grant you anything, you know, and you don't need a license. You know, in the Constitution talks about free commerce. That's not free commerce, you know, so right. That's another argument or a whole nother topic in and of itself. You know, but we kept going, obviously, because we weren't charging anybody to begin with. But they took our business license knowing that or thinking that would stop us. But eventually, we had run for over 2 years without charging members. And the only reason that we were able to manage was that people donated, and we were selling t-shirts, online, and people bought thousands of t-shirts. And we were able to not only afford the normal cost of business, our normal overhead, but the increased costs with all of the safety precautions that we put in place. And we were able to fight a $600,000 legal battle that kept us through there. So eventually the town kind of gave up. About 2 years in, actually almost 2 years to the day, the mayor of the town contacted our attorneys, and he wanted to know how long we were going to keep suing the town, because we would just sue and lose. The court system in New Jersey is a mess. All of the judges are appointed. They're not elected, which means that they don't answer to people. They answer to politicians. And we just kept losing and losing and losing. But, we were relentless. And eventually the mayor could no longer justify the expense to the town of going to court every time. You go to court, lawyers are making $30,000 every time they step in a courtroom, with all the motions and everything that they have to put in. And eventually they just gave up, and they gave us our business license back. So that was the biggest victory of all, because we were able to finally be a normal business again, instead of like this sort of like renegade operation that was, and very thankfully, getting by on donations. But it's very tough trying to live somewhat of a normal life when you don't know how much revenue is coming in, when you continuously have to rely on people's, generosity. And we were very, very blessed in that people were generous over and over and over again, because they believed in what we were doing. But at the end of the day, our biggest mission was, you're not going to close our business. You're not going to put us out of business. And we're going to keep operating like we should. And it took us 2 years of operating in this, rebellious manner to finally get that business license back, and once again start acting like a normal gym where we collect monthly revenue from our members. And it was that was a huge victory, because that was what it was all about. You can't tell us that we can't be in business. You can't tell us that we can't provide for our families. You can't tell us that we can't provide our service to the community. So when we got that back, for me, that was the biggest victory of it all. The fines and all that stuff, as horrible as that was, that wasn't the big picture for me. The big picture was that we were going to stay open, and you weren't going to close us no matter what. And they tried for 2 years, and they never did. And we owe that entirely to the people that supported us.
Wow, that's incredible. And after all this, I hear that you sold the gym.
Yeah. So, on the back end of all of this, I started to ask myself, okay, like, what now? As the COVID narrative was starting to fall apart, thanks to the many Americans who played their role in it, people who stood up and resisted every step of the way. Everybody had a part in that. Because I truly believe that if people hadn't stood up in the manner that they did, we'd be, like following China's COVID zero policy at this point. But it did. It started to unravel. And on the back end of that, I couldn't help thinking, like, okay, now what? Like, the COVID narrative is falling apart, but we know that that there's many other things sort of coming our way. And I got really tired of feeling like we're always running to the fight. You know what I mean? We're always running to correct government injustices and overstep. And it's like, they're always catching us on our back foot. We're always reacting to bad government instead of being proactive and stopping bad government before it starts. So I made the decision that I was going to run for Congress, because I figured, what better way to stop it than to step up and be a regular person, not a career politician, but somebody who just has an interest in serving their community, not interested in a long-term career. 40 years in Congress sounds like a nightmare to me. But to do it the way it's supposed to be, where people step up and they say, hey, I'm going to put my life on hold. I'm going to put my career and my ambitions on hold, and I'm going to work for the people. So I ran for Congress, and unfortunately we got 40% of the vote in a three-way primary. So we didn't quite make it in. The GOP was our biggest enemy, obviously.
Wow.
But we learned a lot. And after that, I just, I decided that there was other things that I wanted to do that, as much as I love the gym and, I'm incredibly thankful for it. And, I'll probably open another gym someday in the future. I wanted to be of use elsewhere, and I wanted to be able to help other projects. And, seeing while I ran for Congress, I saw the struggle that's going on with parents all across this country who are battling just the insane public schools. And, I just wanted to be able to be a little bit more flexible and to help and to move around a bit. So I turned the gym fully over to my former partner. He's 100% in control, and he's sort of taking the reins on the way out as the legal battles wrap up.
Wow, that's crazy. Okay, so you ran as a Republican, but the GOP was your biggest enemy?
Absolutely.
Sadly, this doesn't surprise me.
No. I don't think many people these days are surprised by it. But it was so funny when I announced that I was going to run. Right after my announcement, the media had, they were up in arms, and the Democrat who was the incumbent, his name's Andy Kim. He happened to win again, big surprise. And the GOP sort of establishment pick. Because they already know who they're going to run long before anybody else gets in the race, and they'll do a little like a song and dance and pretend like they're vetting candidates, but they have their guy. But both camps, the GOP and the DNC, put out emails within 5 minutes and public statements within 5 minutes of my announcement, and they were almost identical. Like the talking points on them were it was like if it doesn't scream Uniparty when you read these two statements, like I don't know what does. Like it was the exact same attacks. It was the exact same concerns about how I was unfit for Congress and this and that. Like you could have just swapped them out, and one would have done the same job on the other one. So once we announced, we didn't run in their process. The GOP, they like you to go through their process where you go to the meetings and you do all this paperwork, and they pretend like they're going to vet candidates, but they don't. So we just ran what's called a right off the line. We're not looking for their endorsement, and they didn't like that very much when we decided that we weren't going to play their game. They actually took it as an insult. And right away they kind of went right to work undermining us. They started by not allowing us to show up at county GOP conventions and stuff like that. And then ultimately they wound up spending about 12 times as much as we spent on our campaign. And like 75% of that was negative attack ads within the last 2 weeks. And they know that works because it's worked for them forever, and they blasted out text messages, commercials on the radio, email blasts, all that stuff. And it's all negative. They don't have any policy that they put forth themselves. They don't talk about why their candidate would be better. They finally agreed to a debate, but then wouldn't show up in public at the same event. And they just ran that Joe Biden basement campaign, relying on technology, social media, and all the money that they have to sort of bury you. And they did a good job of it. They pulled away ahead at 10 points in the primary vote. So it's a very nasty machine. I thought I understood politics as ugly and nasty. And then when I decided to run, I realized that it's much, much worse than most people even can comprehend.
That's incredible. So you ditched the Republican Party, I read. After
so I'm still willing to work with Republicans, but the GOP establishment, I think, is more of an enemy to the people than the crazy left at this point, because at least the crazy left, who they are, and they're very clear about their intent. The establishment GOP, they are just like the professional losers, and they're willing to sell you down the river. They're willing to compromise. And they're willing to play this game of like Republican versus Democrat because it benefits them, especially here in the state of New Jersey. The GOP hasn't done anything in the last 2, 3, 4 decades. Nothing, in terms of being a conservative, nothing in New Jersey has been conserved over the past couple decades. Our taxes continuously get higher. Restrictions and laws and regulations get tighter. Gun rights get eroded. They focus more on things like transgender, rights and stuff like that than our education. New Jersey has continuously slipped year over year in terms of quality of public education and quality of life. We have people moving out all the time. So the GOP, all they do is pretend like they're fighting, and they always come up short, no matter what. Like they always can't, block the bill, or they always don't have enough votes to pass theirs, and it's pathetic, honestly. And all they do is they take your donations and they run their campaigns. Everybody gets their money. And they know eventually the ball will get volleyed back to them where they can play a little bit. But they're just going the speed limit to crazy town. Whereas the left is just going a little faster. But at least the left, like I said, is honest about their intentions. These people lie and lie and lie in the GOP, and they pretend like they have the best interests of Americans, and they pretend like they're pro-liberty, and they pretend like they're pro-freedom. But they're not. They're just playing the game of inches a little closer than those on the left. So after witnessing just how rotten to the core the New Jersey GOP is, I decided that I was absolutely done with them. I won't be working with them in the future at all. I'm happy to support Republican candidates, but they are the Republican candidates like myself who, we had great candidates all up and down the state for this congressional run, and none of us won. We were all blocked out by the GOP, and the ones who did get through get no support from the GOP. They get no money. They get no boots on the ground. The GOP just leaves them out to dry because they're happy with the status quo. They're all still in their positions, and they play the game well.
That's pretty horrifying to hear, and I think your experience in New Jersey is exemplary of what we are starting to really become aware of across the nation, especially just seeing how the midterms went down.
Yeah.
And I think one of the key reasons that big red wave didn't happen that people thought was Republican infighting, GOP taking down their own people. Newt Gingrich went on Fox News just the other day and talked about how certain key Republican candidates, GOP cut off their funding in the weeks leading up to Election Day, November 8th. And so they couldn't put out those last ads, and Democrats edged up, and turns out the Democrat candidate ends up winning the congressional seat.
Yeah, Blake Masters is one of many examples. And at the heart of it, what you have is the GOP is terrified of the America First, call it whatever you want, MAGA movement. Because at its core, even outside of President Trump, the America First and the MAGA movement is very dangerous to the establishment because it's very unifying across whatever demographic you want to look at. It's unifying across age, it's unifying across male-female issues, and it's unifying across race and culture. If you're ever a part of any type of America First movement, you see people from all walks of life coming together to produce some really wonderful results. And those results are smaller government, less regulation, putting American interests before we put global interests, you name it. But all of these things are bad for the establishment status quo, be it Republican or Democrat. And the establishment GOP is terrified of that movement because as it starts to gain hold and in the hearts of people and in their votes, it pushes them out of power, or it forces them to actually do their job, neither of which they want to do. So the biggest enemy, of that freedom movement is the GOP. It's the establishment GOP, the neoconservatives that we've always gotten, prior to President Trump. These people love war. They love, sort of globalism. They love all these things. They love big, kind of crony corporatism. these are the people that have sold middle America out for years. I mean, they stood by idly as manufacturing year after year after year, left middle America, left all these small towns, and was relocated overseas, and they're all okay with that because they're all getting their kickbacks and their closed door deals, while they sell America down the river.
So how can the average American, what can we all do to get out of this mess, to break free of this stranglehold that the establishment Republicans and their best friends the Democrats have
Mhm.
on our country as it erodes?
So there's a lot. Obviously, we know that there's some real issues with our election system. But that doesn't mean to give up on it either. So you have to get out and vote. I mean, I was extremely disappointed in the primary, and I stepped away from the gym while I was running for Congress, and I spent every hour of every day campaigning. I was out walking neighborhoods, walking the streets, putting up signs, and I would have dozens of people every day pull over on the side of the highway, just to say hello and just to say they support me. And what I found was that only 16% of people came out to vote.
Wow.
And we can't have that. If we want to preserve this country, we need to be more involved. But with that being said, voting isn't enough either. People need to get more involved in every sense of the word, in every way that they possibly can, but with a focus on the local level first. We're constantly sort of screaming up at the sky, angry with the Nancy Pelosi's and the Mitch McConnells, and the federal government. And the fact of the matter is that these people don't care. They're unbothered by our outrage. Nancy Pelosi goes home every day and she doesn't care what the internet says about her. She doesn't care what people are protesting about, whether it's in DC or somewhere else. She has her security detail and she goes home and eats her expensive ice cream in her gated home, and she doesn't care because she's filthy rich, and nobody's going to do anything to stop her. She's insulated behind a behemoth of federal government to where these people, they're at this point they're essentially untouchable. However, the people at the local level are not. The people that are on your school board, who are ramming propaganda down your kids' throats, the people on your town council, your county committees, all of these things are very achievable positions for the average person. We tend to think of government and we think of like the president and the federal government, but what matters most, and we see this in places that do have strong local and state governments, is that they can resist a lot of the nonsense that the federal government is up to by having, good state legislatures and state senators, strong county commissions, strong school boards, stuff like that. So in order for us to ever be able to change government on a macro scale, we have to start looking at the micro level. We have to start looking at our communities. And that means that we need to get involved. It means that people need to step up and run. Running for office sucks. It's not fun. It's very, very challenging. It's often a thankless job. And if you're doing it correctly, it's a very, very challenging job. But the whole reason that we've wound up in the position that we're in is that we've always just left it up to somebody else, and we leave it up to these people who are essentially psychopaths. Because politics is ugly and we don't want to get involved, and I don't want to do that to my family. And these people are all say, okay, well, we'll handle it. Don't worry about it. But then we turn our backs on them, because we select the blue lever or the red lever, and we assume that, hey, this guy's on our team, he's the GOP, or hey, this guy's on our team, he's the DNC. They have my best interests in mind, and we pull that lever every 2 years or every 4 years. And then we turn our back and we just assume that these people are going to do the right thing, and they almost never do. So we have to get involved on every level. We have to make sure that we're registering voters, that we're overwhelming the system with votes, even at the local level. We have to get out all the time, but people need to start paying attention a lot earlier. You can't just pay attention 2 weeks before your election, when the news starts covering it. You have to know who's running. And the whole reason that we're winding up with these crappy politicians is because we're not paying attention in the primary process. We're not pushing through good candidates. We're not supporting good candidates because it's really hard. Even for somebody like me, I had a big name. I was able to fundraise like very well, but your average person, it's almost impossible to get traction because nobody knows who you are, and nobody's paying attention during the primary. They're not showing up at these county conventions. So the GOP guy or the DNC guy just gets, put in. And then we find this situation where we're always picking between the lesser of two evils. Like, look at the Senate race in Pennsylvania. You have John Fetterman and Dr. Oz, and they're two terrible choices. Dr. Oz was not a good choice. Neither is John Fetterman. But people are like, oh, well, I mean, I guess I'll pick this guy. But if we were to get involved in the primary process much more and people were to pay attention, that problem is going to fix itself because, people will pick good representatives, but you can't just leave it up to the GOP or the DNC if that's your political party, because they're going to pick who's best for them, not who's best for you. It starts local. It starts local because it's much harder for them to fudge the results of local elections than it is for them to fudge the results of these big elections. And the truth is they can't be everywhere all the time. And if you can get one person in on your school board and then the next year you can get two more in, and the next year you can get one more in, well, guess what? Now you have a majority on your school board in 3 years. And that can radically transform the future generation that is coming up through your school system. So we have to start just getting more involved and sacrificing. People are so used to comfort that doing things that are uncomfortable, like going to school board meetings, like reading the news on a daily basis beyond just like the headlines and actually understanding what's going on in their communities and in their state and in their country. It takes time. It's a sacrifice to do these things. It's much easier to lay down on the couch and turn on Netflix than it is to sit there and really digest some informative and impactful news so that you have a better understanding of the world. It's so much easier to turn on the television or to scroll through your phone. But we need to start getting comfortable with being uncomfortable in that present moment, because if not, where we're heading to is a place that everybody's going to be uncomfortable as government continues to grow bolder and bigger and more out of control. We're sacrificing our long-term comfort for some short-term sort of. It's easier to put your head in the sand and pretend like everything's okay and bitch quietly about the price of groceries increasing than it is to stand up and actually do something about it in that moment, because the chances are you're going to get punished, you're going to get ostracized, you're going to have to donate some of your time, you're going to have to donate some of your money, you might lose your job. You know what it's like. But you're a perfect example of it, right? So you could have shut your mouth and kept your paycheck, and it would have killed you over the long term. Over the long term, you knew something was wrong. But so many people will say, all right, I got to protect my paycheck. I can't do this right now. I got a family, whatever the excuse is. And because they don't have a whole lot of faith in their own ability to make things work outside of that system. They're so stuck in it. And it's just easier. It would have been so much easier in the short term for you to just keep going. You read your news piece and you go home and you're upset about it, but you drowned it out with some sort of entertainment, or you forget about it when you're with your family. But you chose what was immediately hard because you understood that the place that you were going to was going to be even worse. And yeah, you'd be comfortable along the way, but eventually you'd wind up in a place where your morals were compromised entirely, and you would have had to essentially sell your soul for a paycheck. And we need to start as a nation being comfortable with that, being comfortable with being uncomfortable, be willing to sacrifice, be willing to take losses in order to gain something greater in the end.
Totally agree with that, obviously.
Yeah.
Great advice for everyone. Okay, I want to jump into, before we wrap this up, shouting out your book. You've got this new book I'm going to bring up on screen, Find Your Hill. Tell me about it and where people can buy it.
So Find Your Hill is, I guess it's a bit of an autobiography. It talks about some very, very major events in my life. I'm somebody who has made some horrible mistakes and screwed up more than once in my life. But thankfully, I was able to learn a lot from it, and it has shaped me into the person that I am today. So the book covers my early years in college, where I was actually involved in a vehicular homicide automobile accident, which was 100% my fault. It was me being a reckless, selfish, idiotic 20-year-old driving, in ways that I should have been driving. And as a result, a young man lost his life because of my choices. And I was ultimately sentenced to 5 years in prison. So tells you a little bit about that, how I was able to sort of work through that, how I was able to forgive myself, how I was able to not only survive prison, but learn to thrive and find gratitude and sort of change my life for the better. Then it talks about getting out of prison, what that was like, and eventually starting my own business, buying the gym, and then along came the COVID boogeyman. And one of the things I learned in prison, or I learned to appreciate in prison, was the idea of freedom. And then all of a sudden somebody came along and was trying to take that freedom away from me and the people that I love. So it put me in a position where I was really able to look at what was going on and be willing to stand up and fight for it, because I had lost my freedom once before and I wasn't willing to do it again. So it then talks about what it was like on the inside of the resistance of fighting the COVID mandates. And then eventually my firsthand accounts of January 6th, being under investigation by the FBI, running for Congress and all that. And it's a book full of lessons that I've learned, and hopefully for the reader, I've been able to express that, because there's a lot of good stuff in here. And I've learned a lot of lessons, and not everybody has to learn them the hard way like I have. And I hope that they can do that in this book.
Love that. Well, thank you so much, Ian, for all your insight. Everyone, you can find his book on findyourhill.com and follow Ian directly. Right there, you see his handle at Ian Smith Fitness. Thanks so much, Ian.
Thank you.